Welcome to Fight News Now. My name is John Pollock with a big show coming your way. We're going to be joined by Ken Shamrock, Elias Theodoro, and many others coming up over the next half hour. As always, you will get your fill of John Ramdine and Robin Black, who stopped by for 3 rounds. And it's a double bill on the shift this week. But it is this past Sunday's UFC card in Brazil that kicks off this week's Newsmakers. Dan Henderson got a much-needed victory this past Sunday in Brazil, stopping former light heavyweight champion Mauricio Shogun Rua in the 3rd round of their main event bout. The win ended Henderson's 3-fight losing skid. After inking a 6-fight contract with the UFC, Henderson is not slowing down, even at the age of 43.
I think at 43 years old, I'm fortunate enough to go out there and have fun doing what I just did. You know, I had fun out there. He caught me with a couple nice punches, but you know, I still enjoyed the whole fight and, you know, happy that I came out on top. But my spirit is still there. I'm in there training. You know, training is probably the toughest part of my age and just knowing when to back off because my body needs to recover a little better. And, you know, that's been the adjustment with the age. But, you know, I feel good and you know, mentally I'm still there. I feel like, you know, I'm still the same style I had, you know, and you know, I feel good. And I'm just fortunate enough and thank God that it worked out tonight.
The win by Henderson is not going to put him into any championship conversations at 205 pounds, but that is the goal for Henderson, to win a championship inside of the UFC. On the flip side is Shogun, who now bolsters a 6-7 record since coming to the UFC in 2007, and we take a further look at the implications of Sunday's main event within the light heavyweight division.
On Saturday night in Natal, Brazil, Dan Henderson and Shogun Rua did their very best to live up to expectations following their fight of the year at UFC 139. After a slow start, the two Pride veterans brawled late in the first, with Shogun getting the best of it. It was more of the same from Rua in the second. However, in the 3rd round, the 43-year-old would drop the H-bomb square on the Brazilian's nose.
Huge right hand from Hendo! Shogun trying to recover! Dan Henderson has done it!
So what's next for the 2-time Olympic wrestler? He offered to step in for Chris Weidman and face Lyoto Machida at UFC 173, but the title bout has been rescheduled to UFC 175, making the matchup unlikely. If he is serious about making another run at John Jones, campaigning for a bout with Daniel Cormier would make a lot of sense. Facing the winner of UFC 172's co-main event between Phil Davis and Anthony Johnson would also put him on the doorstep of a title fight. However, scoring his first win in more than 2 years probably doesn't put Hendo that close to a title shot. Making a rematch with Antonio Rogério Nogueira or a big payday facing Chael Sonnen his most likely options. For Shogun, the options don't look as bright. Rua is just 3-5 since capturing the light heavyweight title at UFC 113, and despite being only 32 years old, many feel his wars in the cage and ring may have caught up with him. However, he is still incredibly entertaining, and with the UFC putting on so many cards, he could headline in Brazil for many years to come. Coming off a loss, the UFC will most likely match him up against a fighter outside of the top 10, so sluggers like Jimmy Manuwa and Fabio Maldonado are great options to put in fight of the night performances. Also, if Phil Davis wins at UFC 172, who wouldn't want to see Shogun throw down with Anthony Rumble Johnson? With so many options for both fighters, these two Pride veterans aren't going anywhere.
Proof that Henderson is not slowing down comes in this week's Tweet of the Week, with Henderson willing to step in to fight May 24th in a rematch with Lyoto Machida after the Chris Weidman-Machida fight was moved from that date. In 2014, it is hard for any fighter to escape criticism. With the higher your profile, the larger the fan base, and couple that with an ability for fans to voice their praise and criticisms of fighters so easily online, and it makes for fighters being forced to develop a thick skin when skimming their Twitter timeline, and some deal with it better than others, and Chris Weidman has seen his stock jump dramatically over the past 2 years and shares with us how he deals with critics.
Yeah, I mean, when I first had my first couple of haters, it was heartbreaking. You know, I always wanted everybody to like me, so I respect somebody, I expect them to respect me back. But it doesn't work like that in this game. You know, there's people on Twitter. Now it just doesn't, zero effect on me. I go to my Twitter account, I see all these negative comments, I just scroll right through it. Zero effect. I come from a wrestling background, you know, and no matter how good I did, there wasn't too many people clapping their hands for you at the end of the day. To have some recognizability and people appreciating what you do, even if it's negative, it's a good thing.
The TUF Nations finale is set for April the 16th as Team Canada and Team Australia battle for 2 UFC contracts. The show has provided a forum for many young up-and-coming fighters with their first opportunity at fame and success and handle it in very different ways. Recently, I spoke to Team Canada's Elias Theodoro about striking a chord with the audience and receiving both positive and negative reactions from fans.
I've been doing mixed martial arts now since about after my first year of university. So the way it kind of worked is I want to enlighten the mind. I was enlightening the mind in regards to university, might as well do the body with martial arts. And it kind of goes hand in hand. With that being said, I did mixed martial arts, but the only real fun thing you could do with it at the time was kickboxing. And even that, it was outside of Ontario, right. Or what's it called? I went to Thailand, had a couple of fights. Like, you still had it as a necessity, get the hell out to enjoy it. But it is what it is, and honestly, I think that needing to like do it myself kind of thing and just make sure it happens explains why my first 2 professional fights were in Calgary, because I literally went on my keyboard and emailed promoters saying, I'll fight anyone, I'll fight you, I'll fight this guy, I'll fight that guy, and I want to go pro, and I knew this is what I want to do, and now I'm doing it.
Also, now that the series has come out, you're probably doing as much media as ever before, you know, but also, I mean, dealing with people online maybe that don't love Elias Theodoro and how he comes off on the show. How do you deal with that aspect? All of the media and people that maybe are you know, trying to get under your skin online and that kind of thing that fighters have to get used to. Yeah,
well, as long as there's no touching of the hair or face, then we're good, we're good. But with that being said, honestly, it'd be weird if everyone liked me. And I don't like everyone, and not everyone's gonna like me. I'm just me, and for those that, what's it called, appreciate it, I appreciate them, and those that don't, they can go fly a kite.
Yeah. You should, if you want to be loved, you should try doing my job, because no one online hates John Pollock, not at all. Elias Theodoro, you can catch him Wednesday nights, 10 Eastern on TUF Nations. And where can they follow you online to give you a compliment on Twitter or anywhere else?
You can listen to my hilariousness on words at Elias Theodoro for Twitter, and then shirtless pictures on @Elias Theodoro MMA.
There you go. Instagram. That's for After Dark with Elias Theodoro.
Rawr.
Ken Shamrock was in town recently, and he spoke to our own John Ramdine for a future edition of Toe to Toe. The UFC Hall of Famer and first-generation star spoke about the history of the UFC and many of today's current stars with the path that Shamrock and his colleagues paved for them.
My concern is that something that I helped build will sooner or later will be gone. For my grandkids, my great-grandkids, to know the history of what I did. And for the fans that love it. As I don't think there's going to be the history there. And we see it today already trying to be cut out. You know, you got pre-Zuffa and, you know, Zuffa. And to me, it's a shame because the foundation of what made the UFC, if they would just show that, the fans would have such a much deeper respect for what these guys are doing and how the process of this went. There's always history there, no matter what the fighters did. And no matter where they came from and what kind of problems they had, there's always a history. With the UFC, they're cutting that history out. And as we go more down the road, it's gonna hurt when those hard times come and you try to show history and you're cutting out half of it because you have a problem with some of the fighters. That's wrong.
And I'm here with John Ramdine, the man that spoke at length with Ken Shamrock. We're just going to keep teasing this week after week. This toe-to-toe is coming with Ken Shamrock, just giving people a little appetizer each week. But that was a very cool chat. Today, you're going to have another great chat with Robin Black because there's no UFC this weekend, but that doesn't mean no mixed martial arts.
That's right, and there's high-level mixed martial arts going down in Sin City this weekend. When we come back after the break, we'll tell you why to tune in to the highest level of mixed martial arts.
The highest level, where Husamar Paul Harris may or may not fight this weekend, pending a drug test. It's all the things I love about mixed martial arts, and we're coming back with 3 rounds. And we are back on Fight News Now, and it's time to welcome in John Ramdine and Robin Black for another edition of 3 Rounds. And coming up this weekend, guys, no UFC event, and I know it's no Pancrase episode 252, but we do have one major league promotion with a card.
Yeah, it's the World Series of Fighting, and of course they're trying to battle for the #2 slot in the world as the second best mixed martial arts promotion on the planet. Of course, Bellator really making a push to become a #2, and I think they've established their place now that there's no Strikeforce. Now there's no WEC. I think there's room for a number 2 in the world. Of course, the UFC, the biggest player in the world. But you look around the globe, there's still a lot of guys that can claim the number 2 spot. To ONE FC from Singapore, Cage Warriors in the UK. But we got to talk about World Series of Fighting. They've signed a number of big names since their introduction to the world. What do you think of this promotion?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting one because I'm excited to watch it this weekend. We'll have some people over at Fight Network, we'll have some snacks, we'll have some drinks, and we'll enjoy this show, and it's a very good show. But that goes to show you how difficult this competition is, because now that there's nothing going on, this is an exciting event for us. But it's the rare occasion where there isn't 2 UFC cards in a week to watch, so that overcrowding by the number 1 promotion, that ability to make everything else seem second and third tier, that's really what you're competing with. But this card on its own is going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
The World Series of Fighting signed a number of big-name fighters. Anthony Johnson, Andrei Arlovsky, former UFC heavyweight champion. John Fitch is there. Yushin Okami is there. A lot of people say, well, there are a number of UFC rejects. Why is it important that the World Series of Fighting acquire some of these names?
Yeah, you got to have names people recognize. You just have to. I mean, you put on an event, you can package it all up nice and put bows all over it and put nice packages together with a pretty girl do whatever you like. But if we don't know who the hell these guys are that are fighting, we're not going to watch it. And if all we know is Anthony Johnson, and we just saw a UFC event on Wednesday and we saw another one on Saturday, we'll just PVR it, or even better yet, we'll go on the internet, that thing, I've heard about it. I think everybody's familiar with that thing. Go on there and just watch the Anthony Johnson fight. So you need top to bottom, and they're also developing some stars. Marlon Moraes, for example, he's a good, talented young guy, and he wants to stay there. He wants to be a part of helping this promotion grow. You find guys like that, and that really helps.
Anthony Johnson decided to not re-sign with the World Series of Fighting. He's going to be fighting Phil Davis in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Say the casual fans, say they check Anthony Johnson's record. Oh, where has this guy been since he left the Ultimate Fighting Championship? Oh, he's fighting for the World Series of Fighting. They click on it. They see the undercard guys like Tyrone Spong on the card. A lot of big-name fighters. It's also the responsibility of the World Series of Fighting to build their own guys. And you mentioned Marlon Moraes. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, and if we're talking about sort of how to do business at this level, another really smart thing the World Series of Fighting has done is kind of tried to have sort of an uncomfortable but healthy alliance with the UFC. Yep. Why? We don't know whether the UFC is helping with the development, or it's, you know, just really smart for the World Series of Fighting, or if straight up the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if the guys you're really up against, and the UFC really kind of dislikes Viacom, who owns Bellator, and the feeling is very mutual, well, let's kind of involve the other guys that are competing with them and kind of make that work. But I'm excited about this card. I'm excited about Steve Carl versus Paul Harris. There's a lot of really good fights.
Yeah, I got to mention that World Series of Fighting 9 goes down in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. In the main event, Steve Carl. People are like, who? Never even heard of this guy.
That's crazy.
This is the World Series of Fighting welterweight champion, going to be taking on the man too dangerous to be fighting in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and Husamar Paul Harris. And for Steve Carl, you look at his resume, a record of 21 victories, 3 setbacks, 29 years of age. This is a great find for the World Series of Fighting. They got to hold on to this guy. He has 16 submission victories, coming off a big submission win over Josh Berkman. This guy is legit.
Yeah, he's about perfect, absolutely perfect as not only a key ingredient, but as a champion, because the 3 fights that he has lost, and everybody's going to lose fights in their career, the 3 fights he has lost are 2 super legit guys. And you know, Bellator had a hold of this guy for a while, and they let this guy slip. Very smart of World Series of Fighting to have him. And Paul Harris, you mentioned it, we can label this guy too dangerous for the UFC. That's kind of a way to position him. At first, the World Series of Fighting said we don't want to touch him. He hurt people. He hurt them intentionally. He hurt them after the referee tried to stop it. We're not fans of this guy. We've been kind of against it. As anybody who fights tends to kind of look at guys like this and go, there's really no place for guys with that attitude. World Series of Fighting said, they looked at it, said that he was trying to change things and they're going to give him a chance. He'll only get one, and he better handle this one appropriately.
A great fight. Josh Rettinghouse taking on Marlon Moraes, the guy that we talked about in the past. Very, very talented. Has a big win over Miguel Torres, former WEC champion. He trains with Ricardo Almeida and Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar talked to us about how talented this guy is. And you know, if you're training with Frankie Edgar and Ricardo Almeida, Canada. You're spending time at Renzo Gracie's in New York City, where guys like Chris Weidman are walking through the doors. Marlon Moraes, another guy to look out for.
Yeah, and you know, it is exactly, again, this is what you need to do. Yes, we need to find those guys who were names in the UFC, everybody knows, but you have to develop these guys. And when a guy has a win over one of the most dominant 135-pound fighters ever to fight in the UFC or anywhere in the world, in Miguel Torres, that really helps. You see a young developing guy, very explosive, very talented, and he's got a marquee win that helps. And he's facing a kid who's very much a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu kind of guy, very much a submission guy. His wins and his losses tend to be submissions. So this is an interesting one. Marlon Moraes probably will get the chance to show how he's developed on the ground, but he's got real power on the feet.
Yushin Okami, former UFC middleweight title challenger, making his World Series of Fighting debut. And again, the last time he competed was September of 2013. Suffered a loss by Jacare, one of the best, I guess, in the business right now. But before that, 3-fight winning streak, victories over the likes of Alan Belcher and Hector Lombard. This is a huge pickup for the World Series of Fighting. Also, Josh Berkman, a very talented welterweight, taking on Tyler Stinson. It is going to be a great card by the World Series of Fighting, John. I know I'm tuning in.
It's coming up Saturday, and we're counting down. Let's not forget here, Palhares still has a bit of a drug test to pass before this fight happens on Saturday.
They have a contingency plan.
That's always great if you have a contingency plan. We're going to take a short break right now. Don't forget, Monday nights at 7 Eastern, you can get more with Ramdean and Robin Black with 5 rounds airing at 7 Eastern right here on Fight Network. On the other side, it's Priscilla Carapan with this week's edition of The Shift, and still to come is this week's viral video.
We're going to show you #1 technique for when you're being attacked by a dog in the street.
Welcome back to the show. It's John Pollock with you, and live mixed martial arts is coming at you this Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern with Cage Warriors presenting Fight Night 10 from Amman, Jordan, and it will replay Saturday night at 9 Eastern right here. We now send things over to Priscilla Carapan, who has a double bill for you on this week's edition of The Shift.
Georges St-Pierre hits the red carpet for the first time at the Captain America the Winter Soldier world premiere. We caught up with the former welterweight champion to discuss his role as Batroc the Leaper, and here's what he had to say about the part.
Georges St-Pierre stepped out of the octagon and into Marvel's cinematic universe, where he uses his martial arts background to bring Batroc the Leaper to life in Captain America the Winter Soldier.
I'm a martial artist, you know, I fight in mixed martial art in the UFC. And my character in the movie is a bad guy. He's a French mercenary. He's a martial artist expert as well, so it was a perfect role for me.
GSP reveals he is a fan of the genre, and he tells us what attracted him to the role.
I'm a big fan of superhero. I started reading it when I was a kid, and it's my first experience as an actor. I'm a professional athlete, so it was a very fun experience. And hopefully it won't be the last. It was a lot of fun doing it, and especially playing a villain, because every day I tried to be a good role model. But now I was able to play a bad guy, so it was fun.
How do we know the good guys from the bad guys? If they're shooting at you, they're bad.
That was GSP giving us his thoughts on Captain America the Winter Soldier. Join us on The Shift next week as we take a closer look at the film. Until then, let's look at a man that still has it at 66. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a DEA agent that finds himself in some serious trouble after he and his team rob a drug cartel in his latest project called Sabotage. We caught up with the cast and crew to chat about the action thriller.
The arrest today of a major cartel leader has led to a seizure of hundreds of millions of dollars.
The idea is they've taken the superstars of law enforcement and undercover law enforcement, put them together, and then put Arnold in charge of this family.
Get your weapons, let's go. Move, move, move.
But the problem is, no matter how bad you are, there's someone badder out there. And now they have the cartel chasing them down. It's a complex story because there's good guys, there's bad guys, there's antagonists, there's protagonists, but it's not necessarily clear who's who at any given point in this thing.
This movie is about human compromises.
Did you steal money?
No.
When does the good guy become bad, and has he always been bad?
I think it's short-sighted to say that this is an Arnold movie. I think a lot of people like me
who grew up watching every single movie the guy made the day it came out and can recite them backwards and forwards are going to see a very different type of Arnold movie.
It's an occupational hazard when you fight the cartels.
Oh, really? You see any other feds getting smoked?
I was really intrigued by the idea of Arnold playing a very complex character in a role unlike any he's ever done before.
In what we do, there is only trust. A lot of times they write the character just the way I naturally look, but David Ayers wanted to get deeper into the character and not just to make it an action movie.
What the f happened here? We used to be good at this.
I told him right from the beginning that I'm willing to do everything that I was asked to do. I'm totally committed to this movie. What about this one?
We trained for a few months, and then even when we began shooting, we were still training. You know, there was hand-to-hand fighting, some MMA, basically, you know, stand-up and ground fighting, MMA stuff.
We trained for 2 months before we actually started shooting, and I do Taekwondo already, so I had kind of a foundation.
Arnold was there every day, just like the rest of us in the trenches, you know. We all busted our ass to try to allow the audience to go into the theater, see this movie, just relax and be taken on a really wild ride.
Target down!
GSP and Arnie, what more can you ask for? That's it for the shift this week. Back over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Priscilla, and the show is nearly at its conclusion, but it's that time of the week where we go viral with this week's video. Sometimes it's funny, most times it's very sad, and you can be the judge with this week's selection.
This is Bella. We're going to show you #1 technique for when you're being attacked by a dog in the street. This is the dog bolo. Bella, jump on your back bone. There you go. So, obviously, whenever your dog attacks you, you're going to go to a far side hip drop. That's just what you do. Okay. Remember, we're going to hold this leg, watch out for the bites, it's really dangerous. Elbow down, control, roll, and take the back. Dog bolo.
And that brings our show to a close. A big thank you to all of our guests who joined us, including Ken Shamrock and Elias Theodoro. Don't miss the MMA Report each Thursday at FightNetwork.com in the podcast section, and you can search for it on iTunes. On behalf of John Ramdeen, Robin Black, Priscilla Carapan, and the Fight Network crew, my name is John Pollock, and we'll chat with you next week on another edition of Fight News Now.